Buckle up because this is not just a wedding story, it's a whole lifetime of being the unwanted one finally coming to a head. Let's start at the beginning. The church. First Parish, one of the oldest in our town, all high-arched ceilings, dust-moted stained glass, and wooden pews polished by generations of prayer. The kind of place that smells like history, wax, and something sacred. When Ethan and I first walked through its heavy oak doors, I knew it was perfect. Simple, elegant, and exactly the kind of quiet, meaningful beauty we wanted for our wedding. The budget was tight. $30,000 total. And before anyone gasps, yeah, I know that's still a lot. But compared to my sister Olivia's upcoming $200,000 spectacle, we'll get to that, it felt like we were throwing a backyard potluck. We weren't trying to impress anyone. We just wanted something intimate. I ran my fingers over the carved wood of the pews as I stood in the empty church, picturing it full, our friends from the lab, Ethan's colleagues, maybe even my parents if they decided to grace us with their presence. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass, painting warm patches of color onto the stone floor. I exhaled. It was peaceful. A place built on love, not extravagance. Ethan squeezed my hand. "This is it," he said. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. If only my family saw it that way. To set the scene, I was not the favorite child. Not by a long shot. My parents had Olivia, a golden, shining beacon of their perfect dreams, and then they had me, the unremarkable one. Olivia did pageants, I did science fairs. Olivia got designer dresses, I got hand-me-downs. Olivia was praised for breathing, and I could have cured cancer and still gotten, "That's nice, dear." So when I told my mom and dad that Ethan and I had booked First Parish, my mother's response was, "A church? You don't even go to church." Not, "Oh, how wonderful," or, "That sounds beautiful." Just immediate disapproval. My father muttered something about cutting corners. Olivia didn't even look up from her phone. I should have expected it. This had been the theme of my entire life. But it still stung. Because here's the kicker. When Olivia got engaged 6 months ago to Gregory, the most insufferable trust fund finance bro you could ever meet, my parents threw themselves into planning the wedding like it was the coronation of a damn queen. Private vineyard venue? Booked. Custom couture gown? Ordered. Swarovski crystal-studded invitations? Oh yeah, those were real. And when she announced that her wedding budget was $200,000, my mother nearly wept with joy. Meanwhile, my $30,000 wedding was an embarrassment. "It just seems so small," my mother had said, with that tone she reserved for people who embarrassed her in public. I swallowed my anger and forced a smile. "We don't need anything big, Mom. We just want something meaningful." She sighed like I had said we're getting married in a Taco Bell drive-thru. Well, at least you'll save money for your real wedding one day. My real wedding. As if this one didn't count. As if Ethan, the man I had spent the last 5 years building a life with, the man who had stayed up with me during late-night research deadlines and held me when my thesis advisor nearly broke me, was just a trial run. Ethan saw the hurt on my face before I could hide it. He changed the subject, steering the conversation away before I could say something I'd regret. But that night, lying in bed, I whispered, "What if they don't come?" He ran a hand through my hair. "Then we'll have 30 people who actually love us." I wanted to believe him. A few days later, I called my mom, thinking maybe I could talk to her about it. Maybe I could make her see. She didn't answer. But Olivia did. "Hey," she drawled, sounding completely disinterested. "Hey, is Mom home?" A pause. She's busy." "Doing what?" "Looking at venues." My stomach dropped. I gripped the phone tighter. "She told me she wasn't helping plan your wedding. Said you wanted to do it on your own." Olivia let out a little laugh. "Oh my God, you believe that?" The casual cruelty of it hit like a slap. "So she's not coming to mine, is she?" I asked, voice tight. She didn't even pretend to be sorry. "Mom and Dad just think, yours is kinda last minute and not really their style. It's not, like, personal." "Not personal." Not personal when my mother had spent hours poring over Olivia's wedding plans, but hadn't even asked what my dress looked like. Not personal when my father had offered to pay for Olivia's imported roses, but had told me I should just pick up some cheap ones from the grocery store. Not personal. I ended the call. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I got up, walked into the church again, and stood in the middle of the empty aisle. I pictured myself walking down it alone. I could do that. I would do that. Because screw them. As I left the church that day, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't beg for their love anymore. I wouldn't cry over Olivia's perfect wedding while mine was treated like a pity event. I was going to marry Ethan in this church, and it would be beautiful. And if my family didn't show up, well, that was their loss. After realizing my family wasn't going to support me, I threw myself into planning. If they weren't going to show up, fine. We'd fill the church with people who actually cared. Our friends, our coworkers, the people who had been there for us in ways my own parents never had. The reception would be at the Silver Elm, a cozy little restaurant a block from the church. It wasn't some grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers. It was warm, intimate, and had the best damn food I'd ever tasted. Ethan and I had eaten there after my first big research presentation, and we both agreed this was our place. Ethan and I had always been practical. We met in grad school. He was in pharmaceutical research, and I was deep into genetics and bioinformatics. Neither of us had trust funds or family money. What we did have was years of work, sweat, and student debt hanging over our heads. When we got engaged, we sat down and mapped out a budget, looking at our savings, our jobs, and what we could afford without going into debt. $30,000 wasn't small, but it was manageable. I worked in a biology lab, grinding through research hours, publishing papers, and occasionally fighting the urge to quit when funding got slashed. Ethan, meanwhile, was deep into pharmaceutical development, intense, high-stakes work with promising pay but insane pressure. Between us, we weren't struggling, but we weren't living in luxury, which made Olivia's $200,000 wedding feel like an actual slap in the face. I walked into my childhood home a few days later. I had stopped by to drop off some documents for my father when I found Olivia sprawled out on the couch, surrounded by bridal vogue, the knot, and what looked like a literal book of custom dress sketches. "Wow," I said, staring at the sheer amount of stuff. "What is all this?" She barely looked up. "Ideas." I flipped open one of the catalogs, running my fingers over a price tag. $12,500. For a dress. I snorted. "You know that's a down payment on a house, right?" She blinked at me like I had spoken another language. "And?" I sat down. "Olivia, how much is your wedding, exactly?" She rolled onto her stomach and grinned. "Gregory's parents are covering most of it. My budget is technically $200,000, but if you count the honeymoon and jewelry, we're closer to $250,000. I choked on my own spit. "You're spending $250,000 to get married?" She sighed dramatically, flipping another page. "It's not just about the wedding. It's about the experience. The ambience. You wouldn't understand." "Wouldn't understand." I took a slow breath. "Olivia, my entire wedding costs less than just your flower budget. Do you realize how insane that is?" She actually had the audacity to laugh. "Well, you're the one who chose to do it cheap." I gripped the chair so hard I thought the wood might snap. "This isn't cheap. This is reasonable." She shrugged. Tomato, tomato. And that's when I realized it wasn't just my parents who thought I was an embarrassment. Olivia did too. To her, my wedding was a pity event. A joke. And she didn't just think she was better than me, she thought she deserved to be. I walked out before I could say something I'd regret. That night, my mother called. I had been expecting it, but I still braced myself. "Sweetheart," she started, her voice overly soft, the way she talked when she was about to really upset me. "I just don't think your father and I can make it to the wedding." I stared at the ceiling. "Why?" "Well, Olivia's wedding is coming up, and we have so much to help her with. And you know how your father feels about small ceremonies. It just seems so rushed. You understand, don't you? Rushed. Small. Not worth attending. I closed my eyes. So that's it? You're just not coming. She hesitated. We'll make it up to you. Maybe a dinner? A second reception later? I almost laughed. A second reception. Like I could just redo my wedding to fit their timeline. But instead, I just whispered, I get it. I knew you'd understand, sweetheart. I hung up before I said anything else. Ethan found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. They're not coming, I said numbly. He sat down beside me, his jaw tight. I'm sorry. I let out a shaky laugh. You know what the worst part is? What? They're so proud of Olivia. Her wedding is this huge accomplishment, but mine? It's just a footnote. Ethan wrapped an arm around me. It doesn't matter what they think. Our wedding is ours. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I told myself that was the worst of it. That if they didn't want to come, fine, I'd move on. I'd have my wedding, I'd be happy, and I wouldn't care what they thought. But I should have known Olivia wouldn't let it go. Because a few days later, she posted something on social media. And when I saw it, I felt my stomach drop. Because this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was about to become very public. I should have known Olivia wouldn't let things go. She wasn't just content to ignore my wedding, she wanted everyone to know it wasn't worth their time. I woke up to a notification on my phone. Olivia Carter tagged you in a post. That was already weird. Olivia never tagged me in anything unless she was making fun of me. My gut twisted as I tapped on it. And there it was. A photo of Olivia sitting at a lavishly decorated wedding planning brunch, complete with mimosas, gold-plated menus, and a table full of equally privileged women grinning at the camera. The caption? Some weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events, and some are practice rounds. So grateful for my real big day coming up. #luxury wedding, #go big or go home. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the comments, my hands shaking. Ugh, I can't imagine having a low-budget wedding. No offense, lol. A $30,000 wedding? That's like a birthday party, not a wedding. Some people just don't have the taste for elegance. And then, the one that made my blood boil. Is it true Olivia's sister is only having like 30 guests? That's barely a reception. It's giving backyard barbecue. Backyard barbecue. I saw red. Ethan was still asleep beside me, so I slipped out of bed and walked straight to the kitchen. I needed coffee, a distraction, something other than the overwhelming rage boiling inside me. I should have expected this. Olivia had spent her whole life making sure I knew she was the better daughter. The prettier, more successful, more deserving one. But it wasn't just about me anymore. Now she was making a joke out of Ethan. Out of our wedding. And that was war. I refused to let Olivia ruin our day. I blocked the post from my feed, muted her updates, and focused on the wedding. The morning of, I stepped into First Parish, my heart pounding as I took in the way the morning light poured through the stained glass, painting the pews in warm shades of red and gold. My friends and colleagues from the lab were arranging flowers, their laughter filling the space. Ethan's research team was setting up the music playlist. These were the people who cared, who chose to be here. I adjusted my dress, simple, vintage, beautiful, and took a deep breath. No Olivia. No parents. No family. I walked down that aisle without them. And it was perfect. The reception at the Silver Elm was even better than I imagined. Laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of warmth that money couldn't buy. Every speech felt real, raw, our friends telling stories of how Ethan and I had supported each other through the hardest years of our lives. Then, halfway through dinner, someone unexpected walked in. Daniel Brooks. Now, for context, Daniel Brooks was kind of a big deal. A major name in the pharmaceutical industry, he was one of Ethan's mentors. The kind of person whose handshake could change your career. Ethan and I exchanged glances. We hadn't invited him. He smiled warmly as he approached our table, holding up a glass of champagne. I just wanted to stop by and congratulate the two of you. The work you've both done is incredible. You deserve every happiness. I blinked. Thank you, but how did you? His expression darkened. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was Olivia's post. But she had added something. Even my parents didn't bother attending this budget wedding. Some of us have standards. The words felt like a punch. I swallowed hard, but Daniel just shook his head. I saw this post, and I had to come, he said. Because this, he gestured around the room, at the intimate, love-filled reception. This is real. And if people can't see that, it's their loss. I stared at him, stunned. Olivia's public humiliation of my wedding had backfired. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Because within minutes of Daniel arriving, our phones started blowing up. And the fallout was way bigger than just family drama. If you thought Olivia's social media post was bad, just wait, because that little stunt didn't just embarrass me. It sent shockwaves through our entire family and beyond. Let's rewind to the moment Daniel Brooks showed me Olivia's post. I sat there, gripping Ethan's hand under the table, my heart pounding. Olivia had publicly mocked my wedding and announced to the world that our own parents had boycotted it. And now, thanks to Daniel, people who actually mattered had seen it. Daniel wasn't just any guest. He was one of the most respected figures in Ethan's industry, someone whose word carried weight in the corporate world. And the second he saw that post, he had questions. So, Daniel said, lowering his voice, I have to ask, is this how the Carter family operates? Ethan stiffened beside me. What do you mean? Daniel leaned in. Your in-laws. Their name has been coming up in business discussions, specifically in relation to that luxury real estate deal. A few of my colleagues are involved. There's a $60 million deal on the table, and they've been making noise about ethics clauses. My stomach dropped. I suddenly understood. Olivia's fiancé, Gregory? His family was deep in luxury real estate. And my father had been circling the industry for a while, trying to get in. The same father who had refused to come to my wedding because it was too cheap. The same father whose absence Olivia had broadcast to the entire world. Daniel's expression was unreadable. Investors are paying attention. If this is how your family treats their own, it raises questions about their professional integrity. My mind raced. This wasn't just family drama anymore. Olivia hadn't just embarrassed me, she had potentially tanked our father's business credibility. And she had no idea. I barely had time to process what Daniel said before my phone started blowing up. Texts, missed calls, notifications stacking up like dominoes. And then, the real bomb dropped. Olivia had updated her post. She must have seen Daniel at the reception and realized she'd screwed up, because now she was trying to backpedal. Guys, let's not take things so seriously. My sister's wedding was cute in its own way. It's just different from what I'd personally want, you know? No hate, all love. Hashtag simple but sweet. The audacity. The comments were ruthless. Girl, you can't undig this grave. So you called her wedding a practice round, and then tried to, no hate, all love, your way out of it? LMAO. Your parents didn't even go? This is actually embarrassing. If my business partners treated their own family like this, I'd be worried. That last comment? It had hundreds of likes. And that's when I realized something. People were connecting the dots. An hour later, I was sitting at my wedding reception, still reeling when my phone rang. Mom. I showed Ethan the screen. Here we go. I stepped outside before answering. Hello? What the hell did you do? My mother hissed. I blinked. Excuse me? Your sister is in tears. Your father is livid. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for us? I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, I'm the problem? Not the fact that Olivia publicly called my wedding a joke. She was being playful. You know how she is. And now her post is being taken out of context. People are talking about our family business, for God's sake. There it was. It wasn't about Olivia's feelings. It was about the fact that their precious reputation was now on the line. You mean Dad's business, I said. Because Daniel Brooks was at my wedding. And he saw everything. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. You need to fix this. I laughed again. Fix it? You mean the way I should have fixed my wedding by making it more expensive so you'd actually show up? Stop being so petty. No, Mom, I snapped, my voice shaking. You and Dad made a choice. You picked Olivia. You picked status. And now that it's blowing up in your faces, you want me to fix it? No, not this time. Don't be ridiculous, she said, voice tight. We're family. Really? I shot back. Because that hasn't meant a damn thing to you until now. And then I hung up. By the time I walked back inside, the reception was winding down. Ethan stood by the bar, arms crossed, watching as Daniel spoke with a few of Ethan's colleagues. When he saw me, he pulled me into a hug. You okay? He murmured. I took a deep breath. And for the first time in days, I actually felt okay. No, I admitted. But I will be. And I meant it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing my family's approval. I was done. But the real question was, what was going to happen to them? Because Olivia's words were out there. And the business world never forgets. I thought that after hanging up on my mother, I'd feel a rush of victory. A sense of finally standing my ground. But standing outside the reception, my phone still clutched in my hand, all I felt was exhausted. Inside, my wedding was still happening. People were dancing, laughing, celebrating. And yet, I was out here dealing with the fallout of a family that didn't even have the decency to show up. But I wasn't the only one who had problems. Because while my parents had chosen to ignore my wedding, the rest of the world had not. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of messages, not just from family, but from old acquaintances, colleagues, and even a few people I barely knew. Because Olivia's little social media stunt? It had gone viral. Apparently, her post had reached the wrong people or the right people, depending on how you looked at it. A few investors in Gregory's family's real estate business had caught wind of how Olivia had publicly mocked my wedding. And they weren't impressed. And the cherry on top? Someone had dug up my father's business connections, specifically, the deal he was working on with Gregory's company. And they started asking questions. Is this the kind of family we want to be involved with? If they treat their own this way, how do they conduct business? Does Gregory's family really want to be tied to this drama? It was brutal. And it wasn't just whispers, it was emails, calls, actual meetings being scheduled. I found out about it when Ethan walked into the bedroom, holding his phone up. He said, eyes wide. You need to see this. It was an email chain that had been leaked to one of Ethan's industry contacts. And in it, Gregory's father, a.k.a. the man funding Olivia's $200,000 wedding, was furious. Apparently, some of his business partners had pulled out of a multi-million-dollar deal, citing ethical concerns. And when he found out it all traced back to a social media post Olivia made mocking her own sister's wedding, let's just say, he was not happy. It took less than 24 hours for Olivia to start panicking. I was sitting at our kitchen table, drinking coffee and finally breathing after the whirlwind of our wedding when my phone buzzed. Olivia. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the best of me. Hello? I was not prepared for what came next. You ruined my life. Olivia shrieked. I blinked. What? Gregory's family is livid. His dad says I embarrassed them. That I made them look unprofessional. Do you have any idea what you've done? I scoffed. Me? Olivia, I didn't do anything. You were the one who posted about my wedding. I was joking, she cried. And now everyone is acting like I committed some huge crime. I rubbed my temples. Olivia, do you even hear yourself? This isn't just about you being an awful sister. You dragged our family name into the mud, and now Dad's business is tanking because investors don't trust him. Silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Then, quietly, Mom and Dad said it was your fault. Of course they did. Yeah, well, I sighed. That's their problem. Maybe they should have picked their favorite daughter more carefully. I didn't think my parents would reach out after that. But a day later, my father called. And this time, he wasn't yelling. I let it go to voicemail at first. But when I finally listened, his voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant he was barely holding it together. "We need to talk." That was it. No anger. No guilt-tripping. Just a demand. And against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them. I walked into the restaurant where they'd asked me to meet them. My mother was already sitting there, her hands folded neatly on the table, while my father was scrolling through his phone with a deep frown. Olivia was nowhere to be seen. The second I sat down, my mother exhaled like I had personally inconvenienced her by existing. "We're very disappointed in how you handled this," she started. I actually laughed. "How I handled this? You mean my wedding? The one you didn't even attend?" My father looked up, glaring. "You let it get out of control." I tilted my head. "Oh, I let it get out of control?" Because from where I'm sitting, Olivia made a public fool of herself, and the business world reacted accordingly. That's not my fault. That's called consequences. My mother pursed her lips. "We can't afford to have people questioning our reputation, sweetheart." I leaned back. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you threw me away." My father's nostrils flared. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" I challenged. "You'll disown me?" Again, silence. Then my mother cleared her throat, forcing a smile. "Let's not be dramatic. We're family. We can fix this." I crossed my arms. "And by fix, you mean what? Issue a public apology for treating me like garbage?" Another silence. Then my father sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, Olivia's wedding is still happening. We just need to smooth things over." And there it was. They weren't sorry. They weren't here to make things right. They just wanted me to play nice and help Olivia salvage her own wedding disaster. I smiled. Then I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and stood up. "No." My mother's head snapped up. "No, no," I repeated. "I spent my whole life trying to please you, trying to be good enough for you. But no matter what I did, Olivia was always your golden child. You didn't even show up to my wedding. And now that your reputations are in the gutter, you suddenly care?" "No. I'm done." My father's face darkened. "You're making a mistake." I shrugged. "Maybe. But at least I'll make it on my own terms." And with that, I walked out. That was a week ago. Olivia's wedding is still set to happen, but the mood has definitely shifted. Investors are wary of my father. Gregory's family is watching Olivia closely. And as for me? For the first time in my life, I feel free. Because I finally realized I don't need them. I have Ethan. I have real friends. I have the life I built without them. And if my parents and Olivia have to learn the hard way that actions have consequences, well, I'll just sit back and watch. You think that after everything, Olivia's public humiliation, my parents' business crumbling, and me finally walking away, things would settle down. That maybe, just maybe, tea. Yeah. No. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that my family doesn't admit defeat. They double down. After I walked out of that disastrous family meeting, I thought I was free. My plan was simple: focus on my new life with Ethan, enjoy being married, and let Olivia's wedding crash and burn all on its own. And at first, it was quiet. Too quiet. Olivia had gone radio silent. No dramatic social media posts. No subtle jabs at me. Not even a pathetic attempt to guilt-trip me. Which could only mean one thing: she was plotting. I was right. A few days later, Ethan walked into our kitchen, holding his phone up with that look, the one that meant, "You're not gonna like this." "What now?" I sighed, bracing myself. He set his phone on the table. "Your sister sent out new wedding invitations." I frowned. "So? I wasn't invited to the first round. Why would I care about this one?" He slid his phone toward me, and that's when I saw it. A revised wedding announcement from Olivia and Gregory. And right at the bottom, a new location. I read it twice. My brain refused to process it. They were moving Olivia's wedding to First Parish, the same church Ethan and I got married in. I laughed. Like, actually cackled. Because this was so insanely petty, I almost respected it. She really just stole my wedding venue? I said, shaking my head. Ethan smirked. I guess she thinks a real wedding deserves a real church. I rolled my eyes. Wow, you think she'll copy my vows next? She'd have to have a soul for that, Ethan deadpanned. I almost let it go. Almost. Because honestly, I didn't care if Olivia wanted to have her overpriced circus in the same church. It didn't change the fact that Ethan and I had already had our perfect day there. She could never take that away from me. But then I got a text from Daniel Brooks. Daniel, did you hear about the church thing? Me, oh yeah. Hilarious. Daniel, might not be funny for long. Your sister's wedding planner is name-dropping your family to secure exclusive vendor deals. Apparently, they're claiming you endorsed it? Excuse me, what? I called him immediately. What do you mean, endorsed it? Daniel sighed. One of my contacts owns a high-end catering business. They turned down working with Olivia because of the controversy, but then your sister's planner called them again and said you personally approved of the wedding. That you and Olivia had made up. I actually choked. Oh my God, that's a lie. Yeah, figured, he said dryly. You might want to shut that down before it spreads. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. Olivia hadn't just copied my wedding. She was now using my name to clean up her mess. And that was war. I took a deep breath, trying to think rationally. I wasn't going to let Olivia pull me back into the toxicity of our family. But I also wasn't going to let her use me to fix her image. So I did something she never would have expected. I called the church. Hi, this is Mrs. Carter. I was married at First Parish a few weeks ago. I wanted to confirm something about an upcoming wedding. The receptionist pulled up the records. Yes. Olivia Carter and Gregory Hamilton. They just finalized everything. I gritted my teeth. Did she mention me? A pause. Then, awkwardly, well, yes, actually. She said you personally recommended the venue. That you and your husband gave your blessing for them to have their wedding here. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. I see, I said, keeping my voice calm. Just to be clear, I did not endorse this wedding, and I do not want my name associated with it in any way. The receptionist hesitated. Would you like me to pass that along? I smiled. Oh, don't worry. I'll handle it. I crafted a public statement. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just a clear, cold, professional correction of Olivia's lies. To clarify recent rumors, Ethan and I have not endorsed Olivia's wedding, nor were we consulted about her decision to use the same venue as ours. Any claims that we approved or supported this event are false. We wish them well, but we are not involved in any way. Simple, but devastating. Because within an hour, people started talking. Comments flooded in. Wait, so Olivia is just straight-up lying to vendors now? Why is she so obsessed with one-upping her sister? If my sister didn't come to my wedding, I wouldn't go to hers either, Almeo. And then? The best thing happened. Gregory's mother commented. Oh dear. I was under the impression the families had made amends. How disappointing. Oh. I nearly dropped my phone. Because that was not the comment of a happy mother-in-law. And within minutes, Olivia called me. What the hell did you do? She screeched the second I answered. I smirked. Just told the truth. You ruined everything. Oh no, I gasped mockingly. Did people not react well to you lying about my support? She actually screamed. I had to fix things, she snapped. People were saying our family was toxic and Gregory's parents were getting nervous. I had to make it look good. And yet, you made it worse, I said. That's a real talent, Olivia. She went silent. Then, in a much smaller voice, she asked, Are you coming to the wedding? I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Absolutely not. She sniffled. Please. It would make things easier. For who? I asked. Because I'm doing great without you. You, on the other hand? You've spent the last month trying to erase your mistakes instead of owning them. Silence. And then, finally. Fine, she whispered. I don't need you there anyway. I smiled. Glad we agree. And then? I hung up. The wedding is in a week. I'm not going. Neither is Ethan. My parents have gone quiet. Probably too embarrassed to reach out again. And Olivia? She's backed into a corner of her own making. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about it. After shutting Olivia down, I thought I was finally done with the family drama. I had put my foot down. I had cleared my name. I had officially noped out of her wedding circus. But Olivia? She wasn't done with me. Because when the day of her wedding arrived, everything exploded. I had zero plans to acknowledge Olivia's wedding day. Ethan and I were spending the weekend at a lake house, just the two of us, no drama, no family nonsense, just peace. That was the plan. And then, just as we were about to head out, my phone blew up. It started with a text from my cousin Lauren. Lauren, holy shit. Are you seeing this? Me, what now? Lauren, check Facebook. Olivia's wedding is falling apart in real time. Ethan, seeing my face, sighed. What did Olivia do now? I didn't even answer. I just opened my phone and immediately my jaw dropped. Because Olivia's wedding was a complete disaster. There was a live video. A freaking live video. One of Olivia's bridesmaids had started streaming from inside the wedding venue, and the comment section was wild. I clicked on it, and the first thing I saw was Olivia, full bride mode, makeup flawless, dress pristine, standing in the middle of the reception hall, screaming at the wedding planner. Olivia, what do you mean the flowers never arrived? Wedding planner, they canceled this morning. They said you never confirmed payment. Olivia, I what? That's not possible. Random guest in the background. Does anyone know when dinner is? The camera panned around, showing absolute chaos. The floral arrangements? Missing. The caterer? Nowhere to be found. The cake? Wrong flavor. Apparently, she had ordered vanilla and got lemon, which is hilarious because she hates lemon. The DJ? Late because he had the wrong address. And then, the moment that broke me. Olivia's mother-in-law stormed in. Now, let's rewind for a second. Remember when Gregory's mom left that passive-aggressive comment on my post? Well, apparently, she had been having second thoughts about Olivia for weeks. And now? She was done. MIL, what is this mess? Olivia, it's not my fault. Everything is going wrong. ML, crossing her arms, is that so? Because from where I'm standing, this is looking like a pretty clear reflection of who you are. Olivia, excuse me. ML, pulling out her phone. You know, Olivia, I tried to let things slide. I ignored the social media post, the drama with your sister, the way you embarrassed your own family. But this is pathetic. At this point, half the wedding guests were watching. Olivia's face went white. And then, the nail in the coffin. MIL, maybe Gregory should take a second look at who he's marrying. At that moment, Gregory appeared, and his face looked absolutely wrecked. I swear to God, you could see the exact moment he realized he had made a terrible mistake. Gregory, Mom, what's going on? ML, just making sure you're not walking into a disaster, dear. Now, keep in mind, this is all being streamed. There are literally hundreds of people watching. The comments are relentless. OMG, this is a train wreck. Run, Gregory, run. This ML is the hero we never knew we needed. And then, right there, in front of everyone, Gregory turned to Olivia and said, I think we need to talk. And then? He walked away. I turned off my phone, stunned. Ethan, who had been reading over my shoulder, let out a low whistle. Wow! I did not see that coming. I set my phone down, exhaled, and looked at my husband, the man who chose me, not because of money or status or family reputation, but because he actually loved me. I thought about Olivia. All her life, she had been told she was the perfect one, that she deserved more, that she was better than me. And yet, here she was. Her dream wedding? Ruined. Her relationship? Hanging by a thread. Her social standing? Destroyed. And me? I was happily married. I took Ethan's hand, smiling for real this time. Let's go to the lake house. And as we drove away, leaving all the drama behind, I realized, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. I thought Olivia's wedding disaster was the grand finale, the perfect karma for years of favoritism, snide remarks, and outright cruelty. I was so wrong. Because while Olivia's personal life was burning to the ground, my parents' business world was about to collapse with it. And somehow, I ended up right in the middle of it. Ethan and I spent the weekend at the lake house, completely disconnected. No Wi-Fi, no texts, just the sound of water lapping against the dock and the occasional crackle of our fire pit. It was perfect. But the second we got back into cell service range, my phone exploded. Missed calls, texts, emails, some from family, some from numbers I didn't even recognize. But the one that made my stomach drop? A voicemail from Daniel Brooks. I put him on speaker as Ethan drove. Hey, just a heads up, you might want to check the news. The Carter name is officially tainted. Investors are bailing left and right. Your dad's luxury deal might not even go through anymore. Call me. I froze. Ethan swore under his breath. Damn. I knew this was bad, but I quickly pulled up the news. And there it was. The Carter family, the wedding scandal that's shaking up the business world. I skimmed the article. It detailed everything. The wedding disaster, Olivia's mocking social media post, the ethical concerns surrounding my father's deal. And the worst part? Olivia's soon-to-be mother-in-law was now calling for Gregory to back out of any future business with my father. Translation? If Gregory walked, my dad was screwed. I hadn't spoken to my father since the failed family meeting. I figured I never would again. But that night, he called. I stared at the screen. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You don't have to answer. I exhaled. I know. Then I picked up. I barely had time to say hello before my father's voice cut through. Fix this. I laughed. Actually laughed. I don't think I heard that right. You want me to fix your disaster? We are on the verge of losing everything, he snapped. This scandal is not my fault. I finished for him. Dad, you chose Olivia. You chose not to come to my wedding. You chose to support her while she ran her mouth online. This is all on you. Silence. And then, the words I never thought I'd hear. I made a mistake. I actually froze. Because in my entire life, I had never heard my father admit he was wrong. Too little, too late, I said coldly. Now you want my help? After years of treating me like an afterthought? This isn't about feelings, he said, his voice tight. This is business. If you don't help us, we will lose everything. Oh! So that's what this was. Not an apology. Not regret. Just desperation. I closed my eyes, exhaling sharply. And how exactly do you think I can help? There was a pause. Then, Daniel Brooks likes you. If you talk to him, if you reassure him that our family isn't a complete disaster, maybe we can salvage the deal. I almost dropped the phone. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You ignored my wedding, treated me like a second-class daughter, and now you want me to risk my own credibility to save your business? You're part of this family, he said. This affects you too. I let out a humorless laugh. No, Dad. It affects you. You made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't part of this family. And you know what? I'm finally okay with that. Don't be stubborn, he warned. Don't be selfish, I shot back. Maybe you should call Olivia instead. Oh, wait, you can't, because she's too busy trying to put out her own dumpster fire. Silence. I could practically hear his teeth grinding. Then, just as I was about to hang up, he said something that made my blood run cold. If we go down, Olivia's not the only one who suffers. You do realize what this means for your mother, right? Oh! There it was. The guilt trip. The final play. Because my mother? She had never worked a day in her life. She relied entirely on my father's money. If his business collapsed, she'd have nothing. And despite everything, despite the years of favoritism, I still felt a twinge of guilt at the thought of her struggling. My father knew that. And he was using it. Bastard. I clenched my jaw. I'll think about it. Then I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. Because despite everything, despite knowing my father deserved this, I still felt conflicted. Daniel Brooks did trust me. I had connections now. If I spoke up for my father, I probably could help salvage his business deal. But did I want to? Would I really put my name, my reputation, on the line for a man who had never believed in me? Was it even ethical to vouch for him, knowing full well that he and Olivia had built their lives on shallow, empty values? Ethan must have sensed my turmoil because he rolled over, wrapping an arm around me. You okay? I stared at the ceiling. My dad wants me to help him save his business. Ethan didn't even hesitate. Tell him to go to hell. I sighed. Ethan. No, he said firmly. Babe, listen to me. He didn't care about you until he needed you. You owe him nothing. I swallowed hard. What about my mom? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I get it. You don't want her to suffer. But ask yourself this, would she have fought for you? And that? That was the question. Would my mother have fought for me the way I was debating fighting for her? Or would she have stayed silent, just like she always had? I already knew the answer. The next morning, I texted Daniel Brooks. Me, hey, can we talk? Daniel, of course. What's up? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I took a deep breath and typed. Me, I just wanted to say, whatever happens with my father's business, I trust your judgment. You have to do what's right. No hard feelings. Daniel, I appreciate that. For what it's worth, I think you're the only Carter who actually has integrity. I smiled to myself. And just like that, I made my choice. I wasn't going to save my father. I wasn't going to lie for him. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. And whatever happened next, they would have to deal with it on their own. I thought choosing not to save my father's business would be the final chapter in all of this. That after my message to Daniel Brooks, I could close the door on my family's drama for good. But my family? They don't go down without a fight. And their last-ditch effort to drag me back into their mess? It happened in public. A week after Olivia's train wreck wedding, I got a text from my mother. Mom, come to dinner Sunday. We need to talk. I showed Ethan, expecting him to say, ignore it like usual. But instead, he frowned. They wouldn't ask unless they were desperate. And honestly, I was curious. I wanted to see what they looked like now, standing in the wreckage of the life they built on favoritism, money, and fake perfection. So, against my better judgment, I went. I walked into the restaurant and immediately noticed two things. One, Olivia wasn't there. I later found out she was hiding at a spa retreat after her ML called her a walking PR disaster at the wedding. Two, my father looked 10 years older. I sat down, crossing my arms. All right, let's hear it. My mother started with the guilt trip. Sweetheart, you've been so distant. I laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to be grateful that you skipped my wedding? My father exhaled sharply. Let's not rehash the past. We need to move forward. I tilted my head. By move forward, you mean fix your mess for you? Silence. Then my mother leaned forward. The deal fell apart. I shrugged. Not my problem. She bristled. Your father's business is in jeopardy. Our reputation is in jeopardy. I stared at her. You mean his business? The one you never cared to involve me in. Until now. My father's jaw tightened. Do you have any idea how much this has cost us? I smirked. No. But I know exactly how much your absence at my wedding cost me. Oh wait, nothing. Because I had people there who actually love me. My mother flinched like I had slapped her. I set down my napkin and stood up. You didn't want me in your family before. You don't get to want me now just because it's convenient. And with that, I walked away. I left them sitting there, stunned, in the mess they created. And I didn't look back. That night, I posted something on social media. Nothing dramatic. Nothing petty. Just this. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. And when it mattered most, mine did. And in the photo? A picture from my wedding. Me and Ethan, laughing with our friends, surrounded by people who actually chose to be there. I didn't tag anyone, but my parents saw it. And Olivia? She saw it too. Because the next morning, I woke up to one last message from her. Olivia, I hope you're happy. You got everything you wanted. I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I truly did. I thought Olivia's bitter text, I hope you're happy. You got everything you wanted, would be the last thing I ever heard from her. But as it turns out, my family had one last lesson to learn. And the universe had one last twist waiting for them. After I walked out of that restaurant, my parents didn't call. They didn't text. They went silent. At first, I thought it was another power move, the silent treatment they always used when they wanted me to come crawling back. But a month passed. Then 2. And suddenly, I realized they weren't ignoring me. They just had bigger problems to deal with. Because Olivia's reputation? Still in tatters. My father's business? Officially sinking. Gregory? He didn't break up with Olivia yet, but his family had cut ties with mine. And as for my mother? For the first time in her entire life, she was learning what it meant to not be able to rely on my father's money. They were falling apart. And the wildest part? I didn't feel sorry for them. Because after years of them treating me like an afterthought, I was finally free. While my family was unraveling, Ethan and I were thriving. I got promoted at my lab. Ethan's research landed a major pharmaceutical contract. We bought a home, our own home, built on our hard work. And one night, as I sat on our new couch, sipping wine, I realized something. I didn't miss them. Not once. I hadn't seen my mother in almost 6 months when I ran into her by accident. I was at a cafe, grabbing coffee before work, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Alexandra. I turned, and there she was. Except, she didn't look like her. Her usual polished, confident demeanor? Gone. She looked tired, stressed, and for the first time in my life, she looked small. We stood there for a long moment, just staring at each other. Then she exhaled. I suppose you're happy now. I tilted my head. Happy about what? She gave a humorless laugh. You know, the way things turned out. And I didn't know. She was waiting for me to gloat, to throw it in her face that my life was flourishing while hers was falling apart. But instead, I just shrugged. I am happy, yeah. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. You really don't care, do you? I studied her for a moment. Then I said, softly but firmly, no, I don't. And the second those words left my mouth, I realized they were true. For so long, I had wanted her approval. I had ached for her love. But now? I didn't need it. I didn't want it. She stared at me, waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my coffee, gave her one last look, and walked away. And this time, I wasn't sad. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you don't need to prove your worth to people who are never willing to see it. I spent years chasing a family that never truly wanted me. And in the end, they lost me. And that's their loss.